All right. Back to Senator Plale. What factors do you or would you take into consideration on a jobs or energy bill?
Well, again, I go back to the earlier question, do no harm. You know, when it was, what, 2 sessions ago, Act 141, I was the co-sponsor of the bill that created the first renewable portfolio standard in the state of Wisconsin. That was a bipartisan bill. It was co-authored by myself and Senator Rob Coles from Green Bay. And that bill has paid wonderful dividends. If you drive from here to Green Bay, you will pass through counties where wind farms are going up all over the place. If you go in Trumbull County, you will see wind farms going up. You will, you have to get off the beaten path, but you will see manure digesters where we're taking animal waste and turning that into electric power. We have companies that are doing plasma gasification, and we've got a great company up in Manitowoc that are building light pipes for industry all around the world. Those are businesses that exist here. And we were able to do that. We did that without breaking the back of the manufacturing backbone that makes up the state of Wisconsin. You can have it both ways when it comes to manufacturing and the environment. What was proposed in the Clean Energy Jobs Act it made great press releases. You know, if 15 by 13 sounds great, oh man, 25 by 25 sounds great. Doesn't that make it makes a great bumper sticker. But when you put it into real terms, when you put it into human terms, when you put it into economic terms, that bill would have killed jobs. And I know a lot of people, including my opponent, like to blame Jeff Plale for killing that bill. I got to tell you, Jeff Plale didn't kill that bill. The price tag of that bill killed that bill. Because when my colleagues in the state Senate, I'm not talking about both caucuses, I'm talking about the 18 members of the Democratic caucus, looked at that bill and said, oh my God, this is going to drive electric rates up $1,000 on an average house in my district. I can't sell that. I can't go back home and say that this is a good idea. The other bizarre irony in this, it never had the votes to pass the assembly. Speaker Sheridan told me that it was between 8 and 10 votes short of ever getting to a vote in the assembly. It wasn't anything that I did or anything that one person did. The price tag was just too hefty. But it makes for good political expedience to blame somebody, and well, you're seeing the results of that in your mailbox every day.
Okay. And your response, Supervisor Larson?
Yeah, I mean, this was 2 years worth of work, the Clean Energy Jobs Act, by the governor's task force. So it wasn't some type of a bumper sticker slogan, let's see what we can do, let's shoot from the hip. This was a task force that worked together and tried to find the best solution possible for moving towards Wisconsin's energy independence. And I don't think anybody in this room needs to be convinced that we need to do what we can to get to that, not just as a nation, but as a state. We don't have oil, we don't have coal, we don't have natural gas. And so when those dollars leave our state for energy, they leave our economy. So when you move up our renewable energy standards to 25% by 2025, that keeps $4 billion more in our local economy circulating among jobs. And these are the state's estimates, the independent state's estimates, that we would have created 15,000 new jobs. It would have lowered rates for consumers $1 billion over 15 years. And on top of that, it would have been great for the environment. And on somebody who has asthma, that's something that's important. And if you have all of those other benefits along with it from an independent study, I was abhorred to see that this thing fell apart on the 40th anniversary of Earth Day because my opponent decided not to allow it to come up for a vote by quoting estimates that came from Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce that didn't want to see this bill come up. And I think that's the biggest tragedy, that this is something that was killed when it could have been so good for everybody. And if the votes weren't there, I think that this is something where you work with people to talk to them and lead and convince them that this is something that's good, instead of catering to talking points that flood in from polluting groups. You know, sometimes you have to lead. Sometimes you can't just follow the whims of people who are going to shout at you from talk radio. Sometimes you need to lead, and that's exactly what I'll do when elected to be your state senator.
Senator requested a 15-second.
You got your 15-second mulligan. I'm going to take mine if that's all right.
30.
I served on that task force. I served for 2 years on that task force. I worked for 2 years out of my life trying to get a bill that made good economic sense. And I was kind of the skunk of the garden party, because I was always the guy who talked about the cost. How much is this going to cost? Oh, the governor said don't talk about cost. We don't need to talk about cost. This is about the environment. Come on, we live in the real world. Each of us has to pay a monthly electric utility bill. We cannot ignore the cost. And this goes beyond just our bills. This goes back to those companies I mentioned earlier that are heavy energy users. And I'm going to go back to Bucyrus, one of the few manufacturing companies in this state that's hiring, and tell them that they can't hire people because we got to drive their electric bill up. I'm not going to do that.
Okay. Thank you. We are now past our 8 o'clock promise of the stoppage of questions, but just ask one more. It seems there's been a lot of, not unique in this election, but there seems to be a lot of interaction from political action committees, and this person asked a question about that. There are political action committees and other outside forces which are still allowed to influence campaigns, oftentimes with underhanded tactics and deceptive advertising. Can you promise the people of Bayview you will work to put an end to it in the next term?
This is to me?
Yes, it is.
This is something that's key and important to me. It's something that I believe in strongly, that we need to move towards publicly funded elections for state candidates. That's something to move forward for Supreme Court candidates, but I think for all state candidates, what we need to do is model something in the line of what's happening in Maine. I actually mentioned this to a person today named Ed Garvey, and he's like, well, I'd be happy to work with you on that. I helped work with Maine on what they did there. And what you do, instead of dialing for dollars, and instead of making promises to people of what you'll do for their money, and spending the first half of your day trying to do that, you go out and you talk to voters. And what you do is you can get $5 contributions times a certain number of people in the district. And once you get to that point, the election is publicly financed. And what that does is it frees up the candidate to talk about the issues that matter most to people in the district. And I think that that's something that's key, not just for our area, but for all of Wisconsin and for the country. Because otherwise we have candidates and you have elected officials that aren't representing their district anymore. They're representing the interests that pay their bills, that pay their campaign into their campaign finance. And so that's something that needs to stop. So as soon as these mailers started coming out, at first they were against Senator Plale, and now they're coming out, we knew they would, against me. I winced every single time I saw one, and I still do, because it takes our attention off of the issues that matter. It takes our attention away from our parks that are falling apart, our transit system that's falling apart, jobs that we're losing, the fact that we can't get clean energy legislation, and the fact that our bridge is falling apart. And it distracts from all of that, and it distorts it in a package that can't be trusted. So we put out a press release saying that I would love to get rid of these groups and have an honest conversation and get these people out of our conversation so we can have it amongst ourselves and decide what's best for our future, not these outside interest groups.
Thank you.
Well, I think that unfortunately in this race, you know, in some ways, Chris and I have almost become bit players because of these outside interest groups that have weighed in so heavily. And you know, one of the pieces says, "Oh, Plale's too close to special interests and all that stuff." Well, you know, these aren't little old guys sitting around the table throwing money into a cup that are flooding your mailbox. Yeah, it would be great to get to a position in our society where these are the situations that matter. These are the exchanges that matter. Unless you either put Chris or me on the Supreme Court, given the Supreme Court, I don't think that's going to change. I was glad to see your press release today. I'm glad to see that there is, you're kind of quiet when you're the beneficiary of them, but I'm glad to see that you're supportive now. I've supported the impartial justice bill. I've worked closely with Senator Urbanbach over the years on the Urbanbach-Ellis campaign finance bill. It's something that needs to get done. It's something I've worked on over the years. It's something I'm committed to. And it's something just for the sake of our democracy that we've got to do.
Thank you, Senator. Now I will give you, since you got to begin the debate, I will give you the first shot at ending this by speaking to our audience, many of you here for the next 5 minutes. Senator Plale.
Well, again, thank you so very much for taking time away from your evening, for taking time away from the Packers, even though none of the starters are playing tonight anyway. But thank you for engaging in something that a lot of people in this community take for granted, and that's representative democracy. You know, when I'm out on the doors, there's nothing more frustrating than when somebody will say to me, "Oh, I don't vote, I don't care, I don't, you know, my vote doesn't matter," because it truly does matter. It matters an awful lot. And you know, there are people in other parts of the world that would give their right arm to having an opportunity like this to come and chat with their prospective candidates and their elected officials. I first got into politics back in when I ran for the Assembly back in 1996. And there were 2 reasons that I ran, and their names are, well, at the time there was only one. His name was Joey. He was my son. A couple of years later, my son Jack came along. And I cared deeply about their education, because I saw a system back in the mid-90s that to me was Robin Hood in reverse. It took money from school districts that were frugal, and it gave it to districts that were not. And I saw that as a huge disadvantage to the people in my neighborhood. And I am committed to education, to making sure that all of our kids, and I don't care if they're North Side kids, South Side kids, black kids, white kids, purple kids with green spots. Those kids are our future. That is the primary focus of this campaign. The other primary focus, and I mentioned it earlier, is jobs. We have got to get Wisconsin back to work. We have got to get the wheels of manufacturing turning again in this state. We have got to make sure that we continue to build a middle class in this state that will sustain the great university system, the infrastructure system, the health and public safety of this great state that you and I call home. I saw a very disturbing statistic recently. The 2 fastest growing segments of housing in the U.S. are gated communities and low-income housing. That has got to turn around. And the way we turn that around is by building the middle class, by building those manufacturing jobs, by not harming those manufacturing jobs. Because like I said before, and I know it may sound trite, I don't care if you're way up there in the district or if you're way down there, people